Can you picture a string of these pulling long trains across the desert? Hi, I'm Dan Cortopassi, and today I'm reviewing an HO scale SD40-2 from ScaleTrains. My model is detailed and decorated for Santa Fe. ScaleTrains offers the rivet counter SD40-2s in two versions. The factory direct price for the DCC ready version is $214.99. I pre-ordered and got my DCC and Sound Equip version for $324.99 direct from ScaleTrains. We'll start the model at 100 possible points. The engine is packed in a sturdy cardboard box. Opening the box reveals an owner's manual with DCC and other information. A plastic cradle holds the model. The handrails on the long hood have foam protectors. This is an excellent box that should do a good job protecting the model for storage and transport. The EMD SD40-2 is a 6-axle 3,000 horsepower locomotive. It was first built in 1972 as part of EMD's -2 line. The locomotive was a successor to the older SD40 model. Among other improvements, the -2 locomotives had improved solid-state electrical components that simplified maintenance. My model, Santa Fe 5179, was part of an order of 23 units numbered 5170 to 5192. These were built in November 1981 and featured extended-range dynamic brakes. On an SD40-2, the extended-range dynamic brakes have a little bulge on the sides. A number of details make this model of 5179 different from the way it would have looked as built and into the late 1980s. By 1989 or 1990, Santa Fe had removed most of the rooftop beacons from its locomotive fleet. Around the same time, the railroad started to move the front headlights from the original position above the cab down to the short hood. Engines that had been built with class lights had them removed and plated over. Smaller ground plane antennas were installed behind the AC unit on the top of the cab, replacing larger ones that were located a little further back. In the mid-1990s, many of these locomotives were fitted with ditch lights, and the air horns were often moved to the rear. In 1994, some Santa Fe locomotives got an MKM stencil under the road number on the sides of the cab. My understanding is that SD45s, SD45Bs, and F45s with this lettering were sold to Morrison-Knudsen and leased back to the Santa Fe. Other locomotives with this lettering, like SD40-2s, were still owned by Santa Fe but covered by an MKM maintenance contract. If anyone has more information on that, please let me know in the comments. With the lowered headlight, relocated antenna and horn, ditch lights, and MKM stencil, the ScaleTrains model best represents the appearance of Santa Fe 5179 from 1994 onward. I compared the model to photos of 5179 from the mid to late 1990s, and it appears to be spot on. 5179 survived into the BNSF era. The locomotive later became BNSF 6931 and was patched with this number by 2002. Sometime between 2009 and 2011, the unit was renumbered BNSF 1747. I found photos of it with that number as late as 2021, still in Santa Fe blue and yellow. One online photo site has a note that says it was sold to WRIX, but I couldn't find any other information beyond that. The paint on the model is opaque and thin enough that it only slightly softens small details like the latches on the doors. The markings are crisp and most of the tiny stencils on the shell are legible with magnification. I only spotted a few small voids in the large Santa Fe lettering at panel seams where there are gaps in the markings on the real units too. One flaw I noticed is that the war bonnet is slightly uneven over the blower bulge on the left side, an admittedly difficult area. I know this probably will bother some people more than others, but I think it looks sloppy, so I'm taking 5 points. The handrails are made of a flexible plastic that should stand up to modest handling. The stanchions are mostly straight up and down on my model when viewed from the side. The trucks have freestanding brake lines. The left side front truck has a speed recorder and cable. The engineer's side truck side frames have spare knuckle holders which match the photos I found of the real 5179. The wheel faces are painted, which is a nice touch. I'm really glad ScaleTrains started doing this. In front, the engine has freestanding wire grab irons and separately applied windshield wipers. The numbers in the number boards appear to be applied under or on the back of a layer of clear plastic glazing, making them look like numbers behind glass. Lower down, the pilot has an uncoupling lever, an MU cable, hoses, and a plow. The cab side windows are positionable, though they don't always seem to stay put other than sometimes getting stuck fully open. It's hard to see, but inside the cab has a complete interior. The cab has photo-etched sunshades. The mirrors on both sides of the cab are glued in the folded position and aren't movable. In back, the model has more freestanding wire grab irons and a detailed rear pilot. The drop step on the rear isn't operable. I found this out the hard way when I tried to move it and made it fall off. I'll reattach it with some canopy glue before continuing the review. On top of the cab, the model has an AC unit and the raised antennas common to many Santa Fe units. I like the plumbing on the roof. The turbo exhaust has a see-through grille. The dynamic brake fans have see-through grills and separate blades. ScaleTrains did a nice job with the Q fans in the radiator area that were standard on late production -2 locomotives. Underneath the sill there are a lot of plumbing details, including traction motor cables. Some of these are hard to see unless you turn the locomotive over. The wheels have the common RP25 tread profile. All the axles are powered and all the wheels pick up current. The model has ScaleTrains knuckle couplers on both ends. Looking for a match on the horizontal center line, the front coupler is close enough to call it good. The rear coupler is also good. All the wheels are in gauge according to the NMRA standards gauge. There is no body wobble. The model weighs 18.2 ounces, slightly less than the 18.5 ounces I recorded for the ScaleTrains Conrail SD40-2 that I reviewed previously. Drawbar pull peaked at 4.2 ounces, a little better than the 3.7 ounces for the Conrail unit. I'm running the locomotive on DCC. The engine has an ESU LokSound Series 5 DCC and sound decoder. I haven't changed any of the default decoder settings. Like a lot of DCC decoders, the address is set to 3 by default. F8 toggles the sound on and off and also turns on the number boards and walkway lights. F0 turns on the headlight, which is directional. The forward headlight comes on when the locomotive is set to move forward. The rear headlight comes on in reverse. F2 sounds the horn. The length of the toot depends on how long the F2 key is pressed. F1 rings the bell. F10 activates the brake function. The locomotive will decelerate according to the momentum settings programmed into the decoder and stop. Pressing F10 again releases the brake and the locomotive will start moving. F4 puts the engine in dynamic brake mode. F9 activates the drive hold feature. This can be used to simulate a heavy train starting on a grade. Or a locomotive that is coasting. The engine runs very smoothly. With the sound off, it's pretty quiet. The model has an ESU power pack that will keep it running for a few seconds if it loses track power. The locomotive has no issues on Kato 550mm curves, which are equivalent to a 21 5/8 inch radius. Because it's my preference, I'm going to change the stock couplers for KD158s. I'll start by unscrewing the draft gear boxes. Sometimes I need pliers to get the screw out. This is the original coupler in the spring. I won't need the spring anymore because the 158s are whisker couplers. The KDs fit really nicely in the ScaleTrains boxes. I like to make sure that they swing back and forth freely before I install them on the engine. Before I put the new couplers on, I'll go ahead and take off the shell. Usually on ScaleTrains models, once you've taken the draft gear boxes out, it just lifts out. This is a pretty typical ScaleTrains chassis. It's got a can motor. The driveline is kind of hidden under the frame bits. There's a speaker back here, if you have the sound equipped one anyway. And then the main board and the LokSound decoder. If you had the DCC ready version, there would probably be a dummy plug here that you'd have to remove and replace with a decoder if you wanted to convert it to DCC. Most of the lights are on the chassis, the number board lights, headlight, and the rear headlight, and also the step lights. The ditch lights are actually in the shell, and they're lit with these little pin connectors. This model has sander lines that are attached to the shell, and when you're putting the chassis back into the shell, it's important to make sure that these don't get crushed. So you just have to be really careful and go slow. So it took me several tries to get it back together because of the sander lines. I found eventually I had to take the front and rear sander lines that are by the pilot and kind of pull them out and catch them on the step wells so that they're kind of out of the way, and then you can pop them back in once the shell is back on completely. They're flexible enough, thankfully, that that doesn't seem to be hurting them at all, but it is kind of a pain. So as is the case with a lot of my ScaleTrains models, putting Katie's on it lowers the couplers. And since these were at the right height to begin with, they're now too low. So I will need to do some filing in order to get them back to where they should be. I wanted to do the My Take section a little different in this review because I don't really have much more to say about 5179. It's a really nice model, typical ScaleTrains quality, and if you're looking for some SD40-2s for your layout, then I think this is a pretty good one to go with. I wanted to talk about these guys, and I think this is relevant, so bear with me. This is my model of Santa Fe 5126. Some of you may recognize it from when I was on the other channel. I did a build on that. And this is 5111. These were both made from Athearn Blue Box models. The Athearn Blue Box SD40-2 was, I guess you could say, the state-of-the-art SD40-2 model when it came out. Very primitive by today's standards, but it did have the scale width hood, and Athearn didn't put a lot of stuff on it that you had to remove. Like, they didn't put the grab irons on it, so if you wanted grab irons, you could drill your holes and put them in yourself, but at least you didn't have to take off anything. So it was a good starting point for further detailing, which is what I did with these. And I think before we talk too much about that, it's important to understand why people used to, and some still do, and I still do, models like this. One of the main reasons back in the day was because you couldn't buy this. It didn't exist, The closest thing would be maybe some brass models, but honestly, brass was always really expensive, and a lot of the old brass diesels that I've seen, I just am not that impressed with. So, there really wasn't anything like this on the market. So if you wanted highly detailed models like this that are unit specific, you had to do your own research, and you had to paint them yourself and do all the detailing and all that. So that it was kind of the only way to get here. You know what I mean? Because you didn't have this option before. You couldn't just go to the store and buy something that looks like this. Now I'm pretty proud of my work on these. I think they hold up really well to the ScaleTrains model. They all have a kind of similar level of detail. I think they look good together. The ScaleTrains one obviously isn't weathered yet, but I think it'll look really nice with these other ones. These, by the way, are the what they call the snoot nose version, which were done to house locotrol equipment, which was kind of an early DPU technology. Back then the equipment was bulky, so they had to make room for it somewhere. That's why the SD40-2s that had that had the longer noses. But other than that, they're pretty much similar. And I've been wanting a regular nose, I guess you could call it, Santa Fe SD40-2 for a long time. And I never got around to building one, so when ScaleTrains came out with this, I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll try one of those. So just to give some idea of the work involved, there's actually very little of the original Athearn engine left in this model. The basic chassis, most of the trucks except for the wheels, parts of the drivetrain, the long hood, and the sill are basically what's left from the original model. Everything else is aftermarket, so the cab is a Canon cab, the sub base is Canon, the nose is Canon, all the fans are Canon. Even the rear of the hood on this one is from Canon, because the SD40-2 headlight on the Athearn model was actually in the wrong place, something I didn't notice when I built 5111, but I corrected it on this model. And then it's, of course, aftermarket handrails, all the little details, everything about this is pretty much custom. So, that's kind of what you had to do back in the day to get something that was, as detailed and unit specific as this. I wanted to talk about a couple of things in relation to the ScaleTrains model and versus doing it yourself. And one of those is that doing it yourself is going to save you money. I would like to dispel that myth. So this is an A-line Protopower West motor with flywheels, and this is what I used in my Athearn engines. These are really nice motors, but these days these go for about $75. I looked it up on the website. That's actually to the point where I don't consider these to be cost effective anymore. They're really good, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend them just because they're so expensive. Then Loc Sound Decoder. This has a price tag on it of $123.99. So right there, just with these two things, we're at $200. Okay, and then you've got Canon parts. Lots of Canon parts. Lots and lots of Canon parts. Plus lots of other details. And stanchions. And brass wire and regular wire and LEDs and a speaker and all the things you need to, build a model. By the time you add all of this up, you're easily around the price range of a ScaleTrains rivet counter model with the sound already in it. So, it's not really a cost savings. And the other thing to keep in mind is that this is not this. This doesn't look like a locomotive. This is a pile of parts. I estimate that it probably takes me at least 50 or 60 hours to build something like one of these. And, even if I was to pay myself $10 an hour, which I think is a lousy wage for, skilled labor with someone with, decades of experience, but that's a whole other discussion. Let's just say it was $10 an hour. That's another $500 or $600. So, instead of a $300 model, you've got an $800 model in a way. So, I just, if you're trying to think that this is going to be a time or a cost saver, it's really not. Of course, there are other reasons besides money to want to build something. There are still some engines that aren't offered, prefab like this. So in those cases, it may still be the only way to get them. That's not. We haven't reached the point in the market yet where you can get everything that's ever been made, especially if it's like a one-off, model that was like a wreck rebuild or something, and it's unique on the railroad, and there was only one of them exactly like that. In those cases, building it may be the only way to go if you really want, to have an accurate model. Another reason is because building something, maybe you enjoy the process, or maybe you enjoy the feeling of satisfaction that comes when you finish something and it looks nice and it runs well. That's really cool. I mean, there's a feeling I get from doing something like this that no store-bought model could ever provide. And it's because, this had to be made. And it wasn't just about buying it, it was about building it. So, there's definitely reasons to still want to build things. I'm just saying that, cost savings isn't necessarily part of the equation with that. So I still think it's pretty cool that we live in a time where you can get a model with road and even unit-specific detail direct from a manufacturer, and it's already correct out of the box. I had to do a lot of research, which is also part of the time that goes into these things, collecting photos, looking at motive power annuals, all that kind of stuff to kind of get all the details right. Like 5111 and 5126 aren't the same. Like the roof has different arrangements of the antennas on it. The paint treatment is a little different on both of these. And they both were done following prototype photos. So, that took a lot of time just to figure out how to build them and then actually execute the build. So the other thing I wanted to talk about, and I think it's a very small group, at least I hope so. But every time I review a model like this, it seems like once in a while I get a comment that buying something is somehow makes you a lesser modeler than doing something like this. And I don't agree with that. There's nothing wrong with doing, stuff where you just buy stuff. That's fine. There's only really one requirement for being a model railroader, and that's that you have to like model trains. And there's really only one rule, and that's to have fun. So if you're like model trains and you're having fun, then you're doing it right. And you could have nothing but store-bought models with prefab track like Unitrack or something, and put it on a table with some pre-made structures and run your trains around and have a ball doing that. And if that's your idea of the hobby, great. Not everyone has the desire to do this kind of work. Not everyone has the time to do this kind of work, and some people may feel that they don't have the skills to do this kind of work, and that's fine. You don't have to. I think it's great to have the option if you want to, but it doesn't make you like superior. You know what I mean?
I really, there's enough stuff in the real world that's, kind of exclusionary and, we're part of the club and you're not kind of thing. And I just, let's please not have the hobby be like that. Hobby's for anybody who likes model trains as far as I'm concerned. So however you want to go about it, it's cool.
Let's see what we've got. The model had a paint flaw, so I took 5 points in the paint and detail category. That leaves us with 95 out of 100 possible points, which earns an A. This is a nice model and it deserves a green signal. I think ScaleTrains did an outstanding job on this model. If you're looking for an HO scale SD40-2, then I think you might like it. If you like this video, then please like, comment, share, and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Stay tuned and thanks for watching.